I've had a problem on my Linux system ever since the day I swapped over to Wayland. I use OBS to capture my desktop, and no, it's not screen capture. Screen capture works totally fine. Yes, there are some UX issues, and yes, that could be improved, but it does work. Assuming you're using a sensible package for OBS like the Flatpak or most other distros, basically not the one in the main Arch Linux repos, on the X11 side, you'd have access to a feature known as browser docs. This is basically a way to embed a browser window into your OBS. Now, that might seem kind of useless, but when you're streaming, it lets you embed things like your stream chat, your Spotify music client, your YouTube dashboard, your Twitch dashboard, various other things you might want to see when you are streaming. Obviously, you can go and open those up in a browser, but it's nice to be able to go and open up OBS and everything just to be there. But back in 2021, this issue was opened. Custom browser doc window under Wayland is transparent. If you tried to use this feature, nothing would render in the window. At the very least, it was gonna have its window decoration, so that's at least fine, but you can't see the content of the window. Sometimes if you moved it, I think it did work. I might be thinking about a different problem. Either way, it was definitely not usable in this state. That resulted in this PR being made: disable browser docs on Wayland. This was not being done because the feature shouldn't work. This was being done as a temporary thing so they don't keep getting reports of the feature being broken, because at the very least, if the button is missing, less people are going to ask about it, but also if they do ask about it, you can direct them over to this pull request. Now, you might just say, well, why make a PR to remove the feature? Why not make a PR to actually go and fix it? And understandable. The issue is it wasn't a problem in OBS itself. It was a problem in one of the dependencies. So in 2024, one of the maintainers said this: as mentioned several times, this is an upstream issue. We're actively monitoring CEF updates, and we update as soon as we can. And as has been explained several times already, but in summary again, updating CEF versions isn't just increase the version number. I'm going to close this as it has no real value to the project or anyone else to argue about how development cycles work. Thanks for the input, it's well heard. They know the problem is there, they want to fix it. It is not up to the project anymore to get the fix available. What then is CEF? This is the Chromium Embedded Framework. Basically a way to take Chromium, your web browser, and then embed it into various other toolkits and load web pages, load web applications, and various other things you might want to use a browser for. On the X11 side, it works totally fine. On Windows, on Mac, it works totally fine. On Wayland, well, as you saw earlier, it doesn't work on Wayland, or at least it didn't work on Wayland. One thing you might be saying is, well, OBS is a Qt application. Why are you using Chromium Embedded Framework? Qt has Qt Web Engine, and this is something that David Edmondson asked about. Is there a reason we use CEF directly over Qt Web Engine other than the porting work? The latter would be trivially embeddable, either as the widget or textures can be retrieved and used in any way, and Qt Web Engine does work totally fine on Wayland. Short answer is that Qt Web Engine doesn't offer us anything over the existing implementation and is missing core functionality that we have patched into CEF, OSR, hardware acceleration, shared textures, audio routing. It would be a lot of extra work to port it for reduced functionality. Qt Web Engine also tends to lag behind CEF proper, so it could be done, but remember, Linux is a niche platform, and then Wayland is one of the niches available on Linux, right? So it's this like niche of a niche, and whilst Wayland is the main thing people are using on Linux now, it's still Linux. Back a few years before this issue was opened, there was an issue opened over on the CEF project. Linux add support for embedded Ozone/Wayland Windows. This was opened on the GitHub back in 2019, but this is something that was originally opened back on their Bitbucket. I have already contacted you about Ozone/Wayland/X11 support via email, as you remember, but I think it's better to move the discussion here. As we discussed, ozone/Wayland/X11 can only be used with Views framework now, but it is not allowed to embed host windows into client windows. Whereas adding support for ozone/X11 is trivial, ozone/Wayland requires some design changes. That is, you propose to start with CF client application, and here is what I think. The CF client has two main window classes: root window GTK that uses the GTK toolkit to create windows, and browser window std GTK. I don't take OSR here, as it does not look like there are any changes needed to make it work with Wayland, as it is going to be the client hosting the top level window without any need to embed a CF window into that. And this goes on continuing to explain the problem, and this is actually quite a large thread, but unlike some of the other large threads we've talked about, most of it is actually on topic, talking about the issue and how to address the issue. In the meantime, over in the OBS project, people had suggestions for a workaround, not exactly a fix, but something that'll get it working. What you do is you don't have to revert the commit, this is not at all relevant, but you just launch OBS through XWayland. And when it's launched through XWayland, I don't know why it scrolled, when it's launched through XWayland, the X11 windows now work fine, and the problem is no longer there because the browser docs are now being rendered under XWayland, and it's totally fine. This was also split out into a dedicated issue as well, but it was not a solution, it was more of a workaround, because all you're doing is just making it run under X11. That's good as an individual user, but it did cause a number of issues. It broke a couple of plugins like OBS VK Capture, specifically with NVIDIA, because NVIDIA, also this is something that was directly not supported by the project. It can be done, but if you had a bug, they didn't care. If you wanted to report that bug, you would then have to replicate it under Wayland, under X11 proper, not under your XWayland version. I know quite a few people that have used this solution, and if you knew what you were getting into, you knew the limitations, it was a mostly fine workaround, but long term, you want it actually working under native Wayland. As I said before, the CEF issue was slowly progressing, discussions were being had, improvements were slowly being made, and eventually we get to this one here. Update on my end, January 11th, 2025. We are able to run CEF on Flutter plus Wayland, but not without a patch to Chromium. Rendering is not optimal, but works. Build setup/note on native implementation here. The Chromium GPU stack in main has moved to a hard dependency on Angle. Angle is an OpenGL compatibility layer that allows multiple platforms to use the same GL API. Today, in main Angle, it does not support Wayland. Yesterday, I pushed a CL to Angle project to support Wayland natively. The CL requires a bit more work to get through the build matrix, but Angle is now capable of running Wayland, and that links over to this issue here over in Chromium. Wayland support. This, at the time, was just a discussion on getting it resolved, and there was a lot of comments here and all that good stuff. Far more importantly, though, is this reply afterwards. The solution I'm working towards for CEF is not dependent on Flutter in any way, it just happens to be the use case that justifies my work. After about a year and a half of working on and off and going through discussions, this change has actually been merged now. Wayland support has been merged into Chromium. That doesn't mean it's in CEF yet. Eventually CEF is going to catch up to the Chromium version. And then theoretically, the problem should be solved. That's what I thought, along with a bunch of other people that sent this my way. Because, yes, a big part of this has been solved, but the problem is not fixed yet. Now that Wayland support has landed in Angle, I want to 1. Clarify what it does and doesn't do, and 2. Ask McGreenblatt, which is the person who opened this issue, for direction on where the remaining work should live before anyone, including me, starts writing it. This is a rendering layer change. We also need to concern ourselves with the windowing and embedding. This part of the equation has now been solved, and my understanding is this is the more complicated part of the equation. This has not yet been touched. What's actually missing? On the Chromium/Ozone side, verified against Chromium 149.0.7827.0, which CEF master currently pins, Wayland connection initialize, always calls WL display connector null pointer, no way to hand Ozone to an existing host WL display, no way to create a Wayland window as a subsurface of an external WL surface, subsurface creation only parents to internal Chromium windows. Now, you might notice the writing of this. The CEF project has no policy against AI usage. So the response to this from the person who reported initially is also, in large part, AI generated as well, and that has gotten some attention from people in the thread. Either way, this is not a resolved problem yet. There is still work to be done. The main question, though, is where should this work be done? Should it be done in upstream Chromium, or should it be a patch in CEF? Does it make sense to ship in Chromium, and then everything else that builds off of Chromium gets access to those changes, or just in CEF to get this merged as quickly as possible? Right now, my understanding is none of that work has yet been done, but the framework is there. The framework is there to actually get this problem resolved. However, when the problem gets resolved in CEF, which still might be another 6 months or a year away, then it still needs to be resolved in OBS. They need to update to a version of CEF that actually supports the new changes, and then integrate those changes into OBS. So whilst I am very excited for the fact that Wayland support has actually been merged, it is not yet everything we need to concern ourselves with. Whilst things are not fixed yet, there is hope. It's just for now, the problem is once again a little bit stuck. So hopefully more progress can be made here, and at some point, browser docs actually work on Wayland, and I can actually use the feature properly. So let me know your thoughts down below. Is this something that has bothered you? Do you even know why you watched the entire video? I would love to know. So go like the video, go subscribe as well, and if you really like the video and you want to become one of these amazing people over here, check out the Patreon subscribe Sally Bearer Pay linked in the description down below. That's gonna be it for me, and soon, TM.
Like this.